So now we've covered a bunch of scenarios, large events and backpacking. What I want to discuss right now is one more kind of separate circumstance that a few of you, it's not as many, will be a part of as far as doing first aid. And that's what's called a street medic. So a street medic or an activist medic or an action medical person are whatever form of medicine they practice, they go to protests, such as rallies or protests or whatever have you, where bunches of people go who are unhappy about something and making their voice heard. Sometimes these are huge, like the Republican National Convention in New York City in '94 had, thousands and thousands of people come. And so a lot of people came to help those people who were protesting, the varieties that they were, and a bunch of us were herbalists. So this is called street medicing, or herbal street medic. And it has its own associated problems and medicines you might want to consider. So if you put it into a situation, it's generally a very urban situation, often a city. And so you just have a very city environment, so very little gathering of medicines. But often you can purchase medicines, right? So something like a cayenne pepper as a hemostat. So you can go into a store and buy cayenne if there's any stores around. So what I want to do is I want to talk about street medicine, street protest medicine, street medicing, and the special circumstances surrounding it. The herbalist who is probably most proficient at this is an herbalist named Corey Pine Shane. Hi, Corey Pine, at the Blue Ridge School. And he would be somebody I would suggest if he's teaching classes around where you are. He wears the badge of honor amongst herbalists and activists, which means he's got tear gassed in the past. So the differences in street medicing are these. A very urban situation, meaning there's lots of pavement around, which hurts to fall on. And it's high stress and high anxiety at these events. Because it's like if you're going to an outdoor event, you're not expecting to get hurt, you're not expecting to have encounters with law enforcement, you're not there because you're all angry at something and just want to vent and kind of vent, I guess. So at these situations, people are already kind of coming very worked up, and it's always a cauldron of stress, really, of just people's intentions and anger and displeasure because they're coming to protest something. So stress is higher than almost anything else I work at before they get there, before they treat anybody. So that's one of the situations. You're always working with stress in these activist camps. There's a large law enforcement presence. So law enforcement are human beings, and sometimes they're horrible to people protesting, sometimes less horrible. But a lot of people have a lot of feelings about law enforcement, and that raises the stress level. Also, it means that people might get arrested. So I'm kind of making this the easy side of it. But of course, you as a street medic working at a protest, you are just as liable to get arrested, put in jail, and held as anybody else. Sometimes more so, because if something happens, you go there, right? So somebody injures themselves, and you run there, and you're running in a protest situation, you're going to be spotted as running, and now you're helping somebody who might have hurt themselves because they were doing something kind of crazy themselves, right? Maybe they were just shouting particularly loud or throwing something, and now you're with that person, and so you might go to jail too. You also just might go to jail because you're following a group of people to help out, and they all get arrested. That happened to a bunch of my students at the Republican National Convention. They were following a group of people that was a bit rowdy, and then the police cordoned everybody off. It was pretty amazing to watch, and took them off groups at a time after holding them for hours in this block of streets. So people go to these things knowing they might get gassed or arrested or beat up. But that certainly happens at all these events. So just a consideration. Other differences is that activists often train beforehand. So at some first aid, sometimes people just go to do first aid. A lot of the folks who call themselves activists who go to these street medic things often do a training beforehand, which is helpful. But as I said before, the tricky thing is, like, if I go someplace and do first aid with people who are already herbalists, they already have skills. What happens there is people train and then go there, and so they often don't have any real life experience, and so the practitioners themselves can get pretty strung out. And so yeah, you're working at trying to maintain the sanity of those people around you, and so that they don't get all crazy, because they also might have a reason to be there. So that's a difference. So part positive, people train to go there, but sometimes that's all the training they've had, and they've actually haven't treated people before. So that's the difference. Sometimes heavy drug use. Though lots of places have heavy drug use, but it could be there too. You have to deal with activist burnout, which is pretty common. Often there's a lot more coordination of the different medics at these things. One thing that's important, if you're doing a protest, you should always buddy up. Often people buddy up in 2 pairs, so 4 people, groups of 2. So if something happens, there's people to witness it and help you out of the situation. So coordination, I would say, is important, more important at these events, because it's much more high stress due to police presence, due to lots of people just being angry at whatever situation is going on. Infections can potentially happen fast because people are in close contact. That's no different than other events where people are in close contact. Insomnia is crazy frequent at these things. People get all worked up during the day, they're exhausted, but they can't fall asleep because they're staying in noisy quarters with lots of other people. And so if it goes on for a few days, this insomnia starts to build up and people start to act weird, as many people do when they don't get enough sleep. So stressed out, not sleeping equals a bad formula for people who just get irritable or grouchy or make bad decisions. And hopefully you're somebody who's taking care of yourself a little bit better. You have to watch out for food poisoning from dumpstered food. A lot of times people are doing it on the cheap, which is great. They might get food out of dumpsters, which could be good. The problem is if it's really old and a bunch of people eat it, just like any other event where a lot of people might eat old food, you can have quick food poisoning going around. It's just a consideration. And you just have people burning out, especially people who emulate the die-hard, very energetic people, but who don't have that stamina, and they might burn out a little sooner. There's lots of ways to give herbs and help take care of those situations. Your health strategies for these groups, just in case it's not obvious, I tend to go to support people, not so much to protest. So I am somebody who considers life a political venture. I think of herbal medicine as a political viable way of practicing healthcare. But I go pretty much just to support people who are helping other people. So I feel apart from the protest, and I think it's a good idea. So if I go there because I want to kind of put it to somebody, that's going to cloud my thinking as far as treating people. But you all make your own decisions about it when you work at these events. So your health strategies, bring medicines that you regularly take. This is a theme over and over again. Basically, if you take medicines regularly, herbal or otherwise, have them, and especially have them at a high stress area. Make sure that you have any medicines you regularly take on you, because you might end up in jail. And if you're in jail and you don't have your inhaler, and this has happened to people I've known, you could be out of luck, right? Or if you take things. Now, some of the medicines might be taken off of you, especially tinctures. So if you think you're going to be arrested at a protest, you should also bring medicines that are clearly labeled and you have a prescription for, so that you can say, I need to take this diabetic medicine. I need this inhaler on me. If they're tincture forms, they might not be believed and taken away from you, and then you'll be without your medicines. Sleep and rest whenever you can. That's your health consideration. Sleep and rest when you can find it. Relaxation techniques. I personally would say having a sense of humor at these riotous things is really important, because people are uptight and they're believers. And so for me, that kind of belief and rigidness just kind of destroys a good, clear mind. And so I think having a good sense of humor is really important, particularly in these high tension things. And know what level of engagement you could be a part of. So, are you okay around police who are arresting people? Are you okay around more serious injuries? Or are you somebody who just you might have a family, and it might be important for you to get back to them soon, and so you might want to keep on the outside of the events helping people. So you might be at a staging area where you're not in direct contact with law enforcement. So those are just considerations for you there. Some of the things that you see in street medic work, allergies. Actually, what you see is anything that stress makes worse, which is everything, is even more potential here than most places. I often see allergies. I see allergies all over the place. I see allergies, as that movie says. Anxiety, asthma, coldness. Just people forget to wear warm clothes and get cold. Dehydration, really frequent. People don't have enough water with them. And then you're out in the streets and yelling. When you yell a lot, you evaporate fluid as well. Diarrhea, food poisoning, indigestion. There's only a few more. Infections. Infections are not sometimes as common because they're not long-term durations. Pain, really frequent. Lots of different kinds of pain too. Potential respiratory infections, just close quarters. Shock, whether it's a low blood pressure shock or just being in a situation that's too much for you to handle. Soft tissue injuries, sprains and strains. Stress, which is an ambiguous word, but it means an overwhelming amount of anxiety and fear and worry. Sun overexposure. Trauma, which is a special kind of stress. And wounds. These are the common things. Things to consider bringing with you. Still with me here? Things to consider bringing with you are inhalers for other people for allergies. But if you have an inhaler, they're by prescription only. So if you don't have a prescription for an inhaler and you have it on you, actually that's against the law. So make sure. But if you have a prescription, you can have a few to give to people who might have allergies. Eye cups, if people get dirt and dust in their eyes. Not if they get sprayed. If they get gassed, eye cups are the opposite of what you want. Putting an eye cup on somebody then is going to make it worse. We'll talk about eye cups in a bit. And eye washes in case they get sprayed, in case they get gassed. What I'm going to do is we're going to post a list of maybe 25 herbs that I would recommend. So I'm not going to cover them here, as we'll talk about herbs individually later, and it'll make sense. But there's a bunch of specific plants to bring on these. But again, categories are what matter. So you have anti-inflammatories for soft tissue injuries, anti-trauma aids, sometimes called anxiolytics, for stress. Those are two of the bigger categories, and then personal medicines. So soft tissue injuries and stress. So for stress, you might want things like Dhammayana tea, kava kava tincture. For inflammation, you might want things like meadowsweet tincture or meadowsweet tea, licorice. Those are some good anti-inflammatories to consider. But those are some of the combinations. Really, pain, stress and anxiety and worry, and inflammation are some of the most common things you see and should be really considered. And what are called hypnotics, things that help people sleep. So that's it for street medic work. There's a lot more to it that could be covered. Once again, there are classes that travel around the United States and do teach herbalist activism and how to work in these situations.